The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast circular room. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through them with steady steps, his black diplomatic uniform crisp and clean under the bright alien lights. Behind him came Captain Lisa Hayes, her military dress uniform showing the silver stars of Earth Defense Force. Their footsteps clicked against the smooth metal floor as they made their way to the human section. Jake had been Earth's voice in this chamber for 12 years now. He had seen many debates, many arguments, many heated discussions between the different alien species that made up the council. But today felt different. The air itself seemed thick with tension. Even the usual chatter between delegates was quieter than normal. The chamber was huge, built to hold representatives from 47 different worlds. Each species had their own section designed for their unique needs. The aquatic Delphians. Soot and water-filled tanks. The silicon-based crystallites rested on beds of heated sand. The energy beings called luminals floated in containment fields that sparkled like captured lightning. Jake took his seat at the human table and looked around. Many of the other ambassadors avoided his eyes. Some whispered to their aides. Others stared at him with expressions he could not read on their alien faces. Something was definitely wrong. Jake, Lisa whispered beside him, look at the Zolonian section. Jake turned his attention to where the reptilian Zolonians sat. Their delegation was larger than usual. Instead of the normal 3 representatives, there were at least a dozen. At their center sat Counselor Vexstar, his 6 eyes fixed directly on the human table. His scaled lips were pulled back to show his sharp teeth in what Jake knew was not a smile. The Zelonans were one of the oldest species in the council. Their empire covered nearly 100 star systems. They had been exploring space when humans were still using stone tools. Vexstar himself was considered one of their greatest military minds. Though Jake had always found him to be arrogant and aggressive, a deep tone sounded through the chamber. The council session was about to begin. High Arbiter Zexalon, a tall, gray being with 4 arms, stood at the center podium. His voice carried clearly through the translation systems built into every seat. Council members, we gather today to address concerns raised by Counselor Vexstar of the Zolonian Empire regarding human expansion activities in the Outer Rim sectors. Jake felt his stomach tighten. This was not on the scheduled agenda. Lisa shifted in her seat beside him, her hand moving instinctively toward where her sidearm would normally be. Vexstar rose from his seat with the fluid grace of his species. He was tall even for a Zelonian, nearly 8 feet in height. His scales were deep green with gold markings that showed his high rank. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Honored council members, Vexstar began, his forked tongue flicking out between words. I come before you today with grave concerns about the human species and their recent actions in space. Jake started to stand, but the High Arbiter gestured for him to remain seated. Protocol demanded that the accuser speak first. For the past 50 years, we have watched humans spread from their single world to dozens of colonies. At first, we welcome this. New species bring new ideas, new perspectives. But humans have proven to be different from other council members in disturbing ways. Vexstar activated a holographic display that showed a map of human space. Red dots marked each human colony and outpost. There were indeed many of them, scattered across a region of space that had grown significantly in recent decades. Look at this expansion pattern, Vexstar continued. Aggressive, rapid, unchecked, humans claim every world they can reach, whether suitable for their biology or not. They terraform planets, build artificial habitats, establish mining operations on dead rocks. This hunger for territory is unprecedented in council history. Several alien delegates nodded or made their species equivalent gestures of agreement. Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his face calm. Getting emotional would only support Vexstar's arguments. Furthermore, the Zelonian went on, human military forces have been detected in contested border regions. Their ships patrol areas that have been neutral zones for centuries. They conduct exploration missions that look remarkably like military reconnaissance. Now Vexstar was showing images of human ships. Jake recognized several classes of vessels from the Earth Defense Force to alien eyes. He supposed they might look threatening with their angular designs and visible weapon mounts. The human military grows stronger each year. Their technology advances at an alarming rate. Where other species took centuries to develop interstellar flight, humans accomplished it in decades. Where others took millennia to build significant space-based populations, humans did it in less than a century. More nods from the audience. Jake could see that Vexstar was building his argument carefully, laying out facts that were technically true but missing important context. "I have studied human history extensively," Vexstar said, his voice growing more intense. "This species has a pattern of behavior that repeats across their entire civilization. They expand. They consume resources. They fight wars over territory and resources. They conquer other groups of their own kind and take their lands." The holographic display changed to show images from Earth's history, ancient armies, medieval battles, modern conflicts. Jake recognized some of the footage from human documentaries, but presented this way, without context. It painted a picture of humanity as a violent and aggressive species. "Now they bring this same pattern to the galaxy," Vexstar declared. "How? Long before human colonies border other council worlds. How long before they decide they need our resources, our territory? How long before the peace we have maintained for over 1,000 years is shattered by human ambition?" The chamber had grown completely silent. Even the usual background hum of life support systems seemed muted. Jake could feel dozens of alien eyes watching him, waiting to see how humanity would respond to these accusations. Vexstar spread his arms wide, his voice rising to fill the entire chamber. "I therefore propose immediate action. Economic sanctions against all human worlds. Restrictions on human ship movements beyond their current territory. A complete halt to new colony permits. And if these measures do not contain human expansion, I propose quarantine. Complete isolation until this species learns to control their aggressive instincts." The word quarantine hit Jake like a physical blow. He had heard that term used only once before in council history, when the machine intelligence called the Devourers had tried to convert all organic life. Quarantine was the step before total war. Now Vexstar was looking directly at him, those 6 eyes glittering with what Jake could only call hatred. "The human ambassador may now respond to these charges." Jake stood slowly, his mind racing. Everything that happened in the next few minutes would determine humanity's future among the stars. Jake Morrison stood at the human delegation table and looked around the massive council chamber. Every alien face was turned toward him, waiting for his response to Vexstar's accusations. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "Honored council members," Jake said, his voice calm and steady, "I have listened carefully to Councillor Vexstar's concerns about human expansion. I understand why our rapid growth might seem unusual to a species who took centuries to achieve what we accomplished in decades." Jake activated his own holographic display, showing the same map of human space that Vexstar had used. But this time, the colonies were marked with different colors showing their purposes and populations. Let me provide some context that was missing from the previous presentation. These red dots represent mining operations on dead worlds with no atmosphere and no life. We extract resources that no other species wants or needs. These blue dots are research stations studying stellar phenomena and cosmic radiation. These green dots are our actual colony worlds where humans live and work. The display showed that most of the human presence in space was actually industrial or scientific, not territorial expansion for its own sake. The actual inhabited colonies were far fewer than Vexstar had implied. Councillor Vexstar speaks of human aggression and our history of warfare. This is true, we do not hide our past mistakes. But he fails to mention that we learned from those mistakes. Earth has been at peace for over 200 years. Our last major conflict ended before we ever left our home solar system. Jake changed the display to show human diplomatic missions and trade agreements. Since joining this council, humanity has signed mutual defense pacts with 17 species, established trade relationships with 31 worlds, and provided disaster relief to 8 different civilizations. We have never initiated hostilities against any council member. Several alien delegates shifted in their seats. The Altarian representative, who had been nodding along with Vexstar earlier, now looked uncertain. The peaceful Etherians had changed from their earlier distress colors to more neutral tones. As for our military expansion, Jake continued, every human ship and base has been registered with council authorities according to proper procedures. Our patrol routes were approved by this very chamber. We maintain these forces not for conquest, but for protection of our legitimate interests, and to contribute to council peacekeeping efforts. Vexstar's scales had darkened to a deeper shade of green, which Jake knew indicated rising anger. The Zelonian counselor was clearly not pleased with how his accusations were being answered. The truth is, Jake said, looking directly at Vexstar, human expansion has been carefully managed and completely legal under council law. Every colony permit was properly filed. Every trade route was officially registered. Every military deployment was approved through proper channels. Jake paused and looked around the chamber again. But I suspect this is not really about legal procedures or expansion rates. I believe some council members are concerned about competition. A murmur went through the chamber. This was dangerous ground, but Jake pressed on. Human technology has advanced quickly, yes. Human colonies are efficient and productive, yes. Human trade relationships are growing, yes. But this benefits everyone. Human medical advances have helped cure diseases on dozens of worlds. Human agricultural techniques have ended famines on 6 planets. Human engineering has built space stations and orbital habitats that other species now use as models for their own construction. The murmur grew louder. Some delegates were nodding now. Remembering the benefits they had received from human innovation and cooperation, Vexstar suddenly stood up, his height making him tower over the seated delegates around him. Ambassador Morrison speaks of cooperation. But what about human military exercises near Zelonian space? What about human survey ships detected in neutral zones? What about the massive defense platforms humans are building around their core worlds? Jake had been expecting this. Vexstar was not just making general accusations now, he was getting specific. This suggested the Zelonian had been conducting intelligence operations against human space, which was itself a violation of council law. Counselor. Vexstar, Jake replied carefully, I notice you have very detailed information about human military activities. Information that would require extensive surveillance operations to obtain. Perhaps you could explain to the council how you came. By this intelligence, Vexstar's 6 eyes narrowed. He had walked into a trap and he knew it. If he admitted to spying on human space, he would be violating council law himself. If he refused to explain, it would make his accusations look suspicious. The Zelonian Empire has legitimate security concerns, Vexstar said finally. We monitor activities near our borders as is our right under council charter. Of course, Jake nodded. Just as humans monitor activities near our borders. The difference is that we report our findings through proper council channels rather than making accusations in public sessions. Now it was Vexstar who was on the defensive. Several other delegates were looking at him with new suspicion. The High Arbiter was making notes on his datapad, probably about potential council law violations. Jake decided to press his advantage. Since Counselor Vexstar has raised the issue of military activities, perhaps he would like to explain why Zelonian battlecruisers have been detected massing near the Kepler 442 system. This system contains the human colony world of New Austin, with over 2 million civilian inhabitants. This caused an immediate stir in the chamber. Several delegates began talking at once. The High Arbiter called for order, but the damage was done. Vexstar had been caught conducting military movements that could be seen as threatening. Those ships are conducting routine training exercises, Vexstar said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Training exercises require advance notification to the Council under the military activities. Treaty of 2387, Jake replied. No such notification was filed. In fact, our intelligence suggests these ships were moved without the knowledge or approval of the Zolonian High Command. This was a calculated risk. Jake was essentially accusing Vexstar of conducting unauthorized military operations. If he was wrong, it could backfire badly. But if he was right, it would completely undermine Vexstar's position. Vexstar's scales had now turned almost black with rage. You dare question the authority of the Zolonian Empire? I question the authority of any individual to commit acts that could lead to war without proper authorization, Jake replied firmly. The Council exists to prevent exactly this kind of unilateral action. The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates were talking among themselves, some looking alarmed, others confused. The High Arbiter was consulting with his advisors. Through the chaos, Jake caught sight of Captain Hayes. She was listening to something through her earpiece, her face growing pale. She quickly wrote a note and passed it to Jake. The note read, Zolonian ships have entered the Kepler 442 system. New Austin is requesting immediate assistance. Jake felt his blood turn cold. While they had been debating in the council chamber, Vexstar's ships had actually moved against a human colony. This was exactly the kind of provocation that could start a war. The debate was no longer academic. People were about to die. Captain Danny Rodriguez was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm klaxons started screaming through the Eds Valiant. He dropped his cup and ran to the bridge, still wearing his sleeping clothes. His crew was already at their stations, faces tense as they stared at their displays. Report, Danny called out as he slid into his captain's chair. Lieutenant Ben Parker, his tactical officer, turned with wide eyes. Sir, we have multiple Zolonian ships dropping out of hyperspace. 6 battle cruisers and at least 12 smaller vessels. They're forming an attack formation around New Austin. Danny felt his stomach drop. New Austin was home to over 2 million people, including his own sister and her family. The planet was a farming world, peaceful and barely defended. It had no military value except as a target to terrorize civilians. Communications, get me Admiral Wells at Earth Command immediately, Danny ordered. And raise the colony's defense coordinator. We need to know what kind of protection they have down there. His communications officer, Ensign Kate Morgan, worked frantically at her console. Sir, I'm getting Admiral Wells now. Colony defense reports they have only basic planetary shields and a few patrol boats. Nothing that could stand up to a battle cruiser. The main screen flickered and showed Admiral Patricia Wells in her office at Earth Command. The older woman looked like she had not slept in days. Her gray hair was messy and her uniform wrinkled. Danny, thank God you're in that sector, Wells said without preamble. How many ships do you have with you? Just the Valiant, Admiral. We were on routine patrol when the Zolonians showed up. What are your orders? Wells rubbed her forehead. This is a nightmare situation, Captain. Ambassador Morrison is still trying to work things out diplomatically, but it looks like this Vexstar character has gone completely rogue. Deploy defensive positions around New Austin, but do not engage unless they fire first. We cannot be the ones to start a shooting war. Danny understood the position, but he did not like it. His single patrol ship against 6 battle cruisers was not even close to a fair fight. But he had his orders. Acknowledged, Admiral. We'll do what we can to protect the colony. The transmission ended and Danny turned to his crew. These were good people who had signed up to explore space and keep the peace. None of them had expected to face a full battle fleet with impossible odds. Helm, take us to New Austin. Best speed, Danny ordered. Tactical, charge all weapons and raise shields. Communications, broadcast on all frequencies that we are on. A peaceful mission to protect civilians. The Valiant moved toward the planet, its single form dwarfed by the massive Zolonian ships that surrounded the world like hungry predators. Danny could see the colony's cities from orbit, millions of lights representing millions of lives that depended on him to keep them safe. Sir, Parker called out, the Zolonian ships are hailing us. Put them through. The screen changed to show a Zolonian commander Danny did not recognize. The alien's scales were marked with military tattoos and his eyes held no warmth or mercy. Human vessel, you are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. New Austin is now under Zolonian protection and your presence is considered an act of aggression. Danny stood up from his chair. Commander, this is a legally established human colony in human space. You have no authority here. I suggest you contact your high command before this situation gets out of hand. The Zolonian's mandibles clicked in what Danny knew was laughter. Human space exists only because we allow it to exist. Counselor Vexstar has decided that your species needs to learn its proper place in the galaxy. New Austin will serve as an example. An example of what? Danny asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Of what happens to humans who forget that they are newcomers in a galaxy ruled by their betters. The transmission cut off. Danny looked around his bridge at the worried faces of his crew. They all understood what they were facing now. This was not about territory or resources or even politics. This was about one alien's hatred and his willingness to murder millions to prove a point. Sir, Morgan called out, I'm getting reports from the planet. The Zolonians are jamming all communications except emergency frequencies. They're also deploying some kind of interference that's disrupting the planetary shields. Danny watched his tactical display as the Zolonian ships moved into bombardment positions. In a few hours, maybe less, they would start firing on a defenseless world full of civilians. Children would die. Families would be torn apart. An entire civilization would be destroyed just to make a point. Captain, Parker said quietly, what are we going to do? Danny looked at the overwhelming enemy force, then at his own small ship. The Valiant had good shields and decent weapons, but against 6 battle cruisers it would last maybe 10 minutes in a straight fight. But sometimes 10 minutes was enough. We're going to buy time, Danny said finally. Every minute we can delay them is another minute for help to arrive or for diplomats to work out a solution. He activated the ship's internal communications. System, all hands, this is the captain. In a few hours, the ships surrounding us are going to start firing on New Austin. 2 million innocent people are counting on us to protect them. I won't lie to you about our chances, but I will promise you this. We will not abandon those people. We will do our duty no matter what the cost. Danny cut the channel and turned back to his crew. He could see fear in their eyes, but also determination. These were Earth Defense Force personnel, trained to protect human lives even at the cost of their own. Helm, move us between the Zolonian fleet and the planet. If they want to hurt those people, they'll have to go through us first. The Valiant moved into position, a single small ship facing down a battle fleet. Danny knew it was probably hopeless, but sometimes hope was not the point. Sometimes all you could do was stand up for what was right and trust that others would remember your sacrifice. On the planet below, 2 million people watched the sky and prayed that somehow someone would save them from the nightmare that was about to begin. High Counselor Morduk stood in his private chambers on the Zolonian homeworld of Zelenora, staring at the tactical display that showed his nephew's fleet surrounding the human colony. His ancient scales had turned the deep purple that indicated extreme rage, something his servants had not seen in over 50 years. General Krexith entered the chamber with careful steps, knowing that disturbing the High Counselor in this mood could be dangerous. The military commander had served under Mordek for decades and had never seen him this angry. High Counselor, Krexith said softly, we have confirmed that Counselor Vexstar moved the fleet without authorization. He used forged orders claiming. They came from your office? Mordek turned slowly, his 6 eyes glowing with fury. My nephew dares to commit acts of war using my name. Does he think I am too old to notice his schemes? Sir, our intelligence report suggests that Vexstar has been planning this for months. He has gathered supporters who believe humans are a threat to Zolonian dominance. They think striking first will prevent future conflicts. Fools, Mordek hissed, all of them. Do they not understand what war with humanity would cost us? Krexith looked confused. High Counselor, surely our military is superior to the humans. They are still a young species with limited resources. Mordic walked to his window, which looked out over the sprawling capital city of Zelenara. Millions of Zelonians lived and worked in the towers below, going about their daily lives without knowing that their future hung in the balance. General, you think like a soldier, you see ships and weapons and firepower? But I have studied humanity for decades. I have read their histories, watched their behavior, analyzed their psychology. They are not like other species. In what way, sir? Most species in the galaxy are rational. When faced with superior force, they surrender or negotiate. They calculate odds and make logical decisions. Humans do not work this way. Mordic activated a holographic display showing images from human history. Battles where small forces held off much larger armies. Cities that fought to the last defender rather than surrender. Colonies that chose destruction over submission. Look at these examples, General. At Thermopylae, 300 humans held off thousands of enemies until they all died. At the Alamo, fewer than 200 humans fought against thousands until none survived. At Stalingrad, humans ate leather and tree bark rather than give up their city. Krexith studied the images with growing unease. But sir, these are ancient examples. Surely modern humans are more practical, are they? Mordic changed the display to show more recent events. When the crystallite plague threatened Earth, humans volunteered for suicide missions to deliver the cure. When pirates attacked the Delphian trade routes, human ships fought them even when outnumbered 10-1. When the energy storm threatened the Etherian homeworld, humans flew their ships directly into the storm to rescue survivors. The general's scales began to pale as he understood what his leader was saying. You believe they will fight even against impossible odds. I believe they will fight until every last one of them is dead, Morduck said grimly. And then other humans will remember their sacrifice and fight even harder. Humans do not just go to war, General. They become war. They turn their entire civilization into a weapon pointed at their enemies. Mordak walked back to the tactical display showing Vexstar S fleet. If my nephew fires on that colony, he will not just be killing humans. He will be creating martyrs. Every human in the galaxy will know that Zelonians murdered their civilians without provocation. They will never forgive, and they will never stop fighting until they have revenge. But surely we could defeat them eventually, Krexith said, though. His voice lacked confidence. Perhaps, but at what cost? How many Zelonian worlds would be destroyed? How many of our children would die? How many centuries would we spend locked in a war that benefits no one? Mordak turned to face his general. Directly, more importantly, what would we become in the process? Humans fight hardest when they believe they are protecting something good and pure. If we attack their civilians, we make ourselves the villains in their story. We turn them into heroes fighting against evil. The High Counselor activated his communications console. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command immediately. I need to speak with their Admiral Wells. Sir, Krexus said nervously. Contacting the human military directly could be seen as acknowledging their authority. Better to acknowledge their authority than to face their wrath, Morduck replied. And prepare our fastest ships for immediate departure to the Kepler 442 system. We need to stop this madness before it goes too far. The communication screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Wells in her office. The human woman looked tired and stressed, but her eyes were alert and intelligent. High Counselor Morduck, Wells said carefully, I assume you are calling about the situation at New Austin. Admiral Wells, I must be direct with you. My nephew has acted without authorization from the Zelonian government. His attack on your colony violates every treaty and law that governs civilized conduct in space. Wells looked surprised. In the long history of galactic politics, no species leader had ever openly disavowed the actions of their own military forces. High Counselor, are you saying that the Zelonian government does not support this action? I am saying that, Counselor. Vexstar is a rogue agent who will be arrested and tried for war crimes if he proceeds with this attack. I am also saying that Zalonian forces under my direct command are moving to stop him. Sir, Wells said slowly, if Zalonian ships fire on Zalonian ships, it could start a civil war in your empire. Mordecai's scales shifted to a determined silver color. Admiral, if my nephew murders 2 million innocent humans, it will start a war between our species that could last for centuries. I would rather risk civil war than genocide. The two leaders looked at each other across the vast distance of space, each understanding the weight of the moment. The decisions made in the next few hours would determine the fate of billions of people across dozens of worlds. High Counselor, Wells said finally, what do you need from us? Time, Admiral. Keep your ship alive until my forces can arrive. And when this is over, remember that not all Zalonians supported what Vexstar tried to do. The transmission ended, leaving Mordok alone with his thoughts and the terrible responsibility of stopping a war that his own nephew had started. Captain Danny Rodriguez watched his tactical display as more ships dropped out of hyperspace near New Austin. For a moment his heart sank, thinking Vexstar had called for reinforcements. Then he saw the markings on the new arrivals and could hardly believe his eyes. Sir, Lieutenant Parker called out with excitement in his voice, those are High Command Zalonian ships. They're broadcasting surrender demands to Vexstar S fleet. Danny had never seen anything like this in all his years of service. One group of Zalonian ships was demanding that another group of Zalonian ships stand down. It was like watching a family fight in public, except this family had enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. Communications, are you getting anything from either fleet? Danny asked. Ensign Morgan worked at her console with quick fingers. Sir, I'm picking up transmissions between the two groups. The High Command ships are ordering Vexstar to withdraw. Immediately. Vexstar is refusing and claiming he has authority to act? On the main screen, Danny could see the two Zalonian fleets facing each other across space. Vexstar-S original 6 ships looked small compared to the 12 massive battle cruisers that High Counselor Mordok had sent to stop him. Captain, Parker said nervously, if they start shooting at each other while we're in the middle, we could get caught in the crossfire. Danny considered pulling back to a safer distance, but then he looked at the planet below. 2 million people were still in danger, and his ship was the only thing standing between them and possible bombardment. He could not abandon his post now. We stay where we are, Danny decided. Our job is to protect those civilians, no matter what happens up here. The situation became even more complex when more ships arrived. These were human vessels, led by Admiral Wells herself aboard the flagship EDS Constitution. Danny felt relief wash over him as he saw the familiar hull designs of Earth defense. 4 ships taking positions around New Austin. Valiant, this is Admiral Wells, came the transmission. Good work holding the line, Captain. Now let's see if we can end this without anyone getting killed. What happened next was unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare. Instead of humans fighting Zalonians, it became humans and loyal Zalonian forces working together against rogue Zalonian ships. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. General Krexith, commanding the High Command fleet, opened a channel to both Admiral Wells and Captain Rodriguez. The old Zalonian warrior looked grim but determined. Human commanders, I am authorized by High Counselor Mordok to use whatever force is necessary to stop this illegal action. If you are willing, I propose we coordinate our efforts. Admiral. Wells did not hesitate. General, we accept your proposal. What do you need from us? Counselor Vexstar-S ships have superior firepower, but they are outnumbered now. If we can disable their weapons without destroying the ships, we can minimize casualties on both sides. Danny listened to the conversation with growing amazement. A few hours ago, Zalonian and human ships had been facing off as enemies. Now they were planning joint military operations to protect innocent lives. The battle, when it finally came, was brief but intense. Vexstar, seeing that he was surrounded by superior forces, made one last desperate gamble. Instead of targeting the planet directly, he ordered his ships to attack the human vessels, hoping to provoke a larger conflict that would justify his actions. All ships, Admiral Wells broadcast, disable their weapons but avoid destroying the Vessels, we want prisoners, not martyrs. The coordination between human and Zolonian forces was remarkable. Human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to distract Vexstar's forces, while the heavier Zolonian battle cruisers moved into position to disable them with precise shots. Danny found himself flying alongside a Zolonian destroyer, both ships working together to corner one of Vexstar's cruisers. The alien captain contacted him directly. Human vessel, if you can disable their shields, we can take out their weapons without harming the crew. Understood, Danny replied. Beginning attack run now. The Valiant dove toward the enemy ship, drawing its fire while the Zolonian destroyer flanked from the other side. Danny's crew worked with precision born of years of training, their weapons striking exactly where they needed to create an opening. The Zolonian destroyer's heavier guns did the rest, carefully destroying weapon mounts and engine systems while leaving the crew sections intact. Within minutes, the enemy ship was helpless and drifting, the same pattern repeated across the battlefield. Human and Zolonian ships working in perfect harmony, each using their strengths to complement the others. Weaknesses. It was a level of cooperation that no one had thought possible between the two species. Vexstar's flagship was the last to be disabled. The rogue counselor himself was captured when Zolonian Marines boarded his ship. Danny watched on his screen as the alien who had nearly started a galactic war was led away in restraints by his own people. All ships, this is Admiral Wells, came the announcement. The immediate threat to New Austin has been neutralized. Well done, everyone. But the real significance of what had happened became clear later, when the joint Human-Zolonian task force held a ceremony on the surface of New Austin. Danny stood with his crew as Admiral Wells and General Krexith signed a formal alliance agreement. Today, two species proved that cooperation is stronger than conflict, Wells said in her speech. Today, we showed the galaxy that protecting innocent lives matters more than old prejudices or fears. General Krexith spoke next, his translation making his words understandable to the human audience. The Zolonian Empire apologizes for the actions of Counselor Vexstar. We pledge to work with humanity to ensure such incidents never happen again. Danny looked around at the mixed crowd of human and Zolonian personnel. Soldiers who had been enemies that morning were now sharing meals and comparing stories. Children from the colony were asking to touch Zolonian scales, while Zolonian youngsters marveled at human technology. Ambassador Morrison arrived from the council station with news that changed everything. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to condemn Vexstar's actions and to commend the cooperation between human and Zolonian forces. They're also proposing new joint peacekeeping operations based on what we accomplished here. As Danny prepared to return to space, he reflected on how quickly things could change. A crisis that could have led to war had instead created the strongest alliance in galactic history. Sometimes, he thought, the worst situations brought out the best in people. Whether they were human or alien, the galaxy was still vast and full of dangers. But it felt a little safer knowing that former enemies could become trusted friends when innocent lives were at stake.